Welcome, everybody. I'm going to introduce our project director, Dr. Paul Yaknin. So Dr. Yaknin has been with this project for years and years and years, going all the way back to 2015. He is a tireless advocate for change when it comes to highlighting the tremendous work that PhDs bring to their communities, to McGill, and to the world, both inside and outside of academia. So I'm going to invite Paul to introduce our host today. Paul?
Thank you, Chantal. Let me just say how happy I am to be here with you and how proud I am of what we are doing. We're really telling the world about what PhDs can achieve, but we're also telling people who are in program what PhDs do achieve. And that's what we're doing today. I also want to say thank you to Chantal. She has been making all this work. I just kind of sit back and watch her work and watch her make progress. Let me introduce you. You've already met Carolyn DeBroy. She is the Vice President of the McDonald Campus Graduate Student Society, and she is your host. She's doing a master's in food science. And you've already met John and heard from John. John is going to be your chat host. So if you feel that you have a question or a comment that you want to make, please do not hold back. Use chat. John will be checking in. I will turn things over now to Carolyn.
Hi everyone, I'm really happy that you have decided to join us today, and I hope that all this information is going to help clear any questions that you might have. So I'm going to start with some individual questions for our panelists, So I'm going to start with Derek Ray. So if you can just introduce yourself, describe your job a bit.
Sure. Derek Ray. I'm a PhD in food science. I graduated in 2015. I studied in the food processing group under Dr. Ramaswamy, and I developed a novel drying process at the time for cranberries, but it was focusing on using microwave vacuum drying, which is kind of what got me to the company I work at still today, which is Bonduelle. It's a world leader in vegetable processing, so canned, frozen, and in other market salads as well. So that kind of got me in the door, the technology that I'd studied, but since then have kind of expanded into other domains. And so now I'm a R&D project manager for process and packaging. So anything that comes through in terms of a novel process or new packaging development, I'm the project manager for that aspect for the company.
Okay, great. So you did your research and found a job that really corresponds to your research topic. Is that something that you'd recommend to students?
If you can, honestly, it was, I don't want to call it necessarily luck, but it was definitely good fortune that position was there, because I was convinced when I was studying that this was a technology that wasn't really industrially applicable yet, at least for a couple more years. But I was proven wrong when after my defense, I took a few months off and then started looking for a job, and it kind of came up fairly quickly. So absolutely, it's a great segue if you're able to find something that is a direct application. But honestly, going on a couple of years or a few years now since then, it's also nice to be able to branch out and work on other things and get away from a little bit exactly what I studied. But it's a great segue into a company for sure, when you can use the expertise that you have to get you in the door and kind of get yourself a bit of latitude in terms of other projects that you can take on as things move forward.
Okay, just for a bit of background to everyone that's joined us. So TRaCE has posted some interviews online on their website. So I don't know if you had the chance to read that. We posted it in the Facebook event. But in that interview, you mentioned that you work really hard on your research, only taking like a bit of time at night to relax and do something else. Did you have like a trick or something to help you stay motivated and focused on your research?
It doesn't sound good, but it was kind of wanting wanting to move on, wanting to get out of there to a certain extent, because I did my my bachelor's there as well. So I was at Mac for a long time. And the first couple of years I was really into it and kind of, you know, really happy there. But at a certain point, it was kind of like, okay, I need to really buckle down, and focus and move my project forward. Because you kind of come to the realization at a certain point that if you don't, then it's just not going to happen. So that's kind of the stage that I was at in my life, where I really, it was a phase where I really wanted to focus and just kind of keep my head down and stay focused on my project. So that's what I did. So there were very few breaks. Outside of just some decompression time, but at the end of the day, I was really happy with kind of how things progressed and how I was able to kind of push myself to do that.
Great. Another one of our speakers is Dr. Seoyoon Seo. So if you want to give us a bit of background on your PhD, your research, and what you do now as a job, what your career path has been.
Yes, of course. Thank you, Carolyn. So I graduated in 2014, a year before Derek. And I studied under Dr. Carboon. My thesis was on modification of potato proteins. And after that, I worked in different companies. I worked at TRaCE Nutrition in Montreal as a technology group manager. And then after that, I worked at IFF, a flavor company. And then to my position right now at Dawn Farm Foods, I'm the R&D manager here, working a lot with the business to set innovation pipelines, R&D programs, and then getting the R&D process implemented. So that's what I'm doing at Dawn Farm Foods.
All right. So also in your interview that's posted on the TRaCE website, you say that you were put in contact with food science alumni by your supervisor. So did that help you obtain more jobs? And do you have advice for students trying to get in contact with mentors in the industry also?
Yes, I was very fortunate that that happened, at the right time. So Dr. Carboon introduced me to the director of R&D at the time at TRaCE Nutrition. So that's where I made the connection. And when they had a position available, I was able to reach out and ask, am I qualified for that position? And, that's how I got, an industry offer. But I think most of McGill alumni that I've talked to in the past, even the ones, that, didn't know me before, that I didn't get through Dr. Carboon, they were very happy to, learn about, the students from Mac campus, what are they doing, what are they interested in? So they're always open to, just talk about different things and, give you advice on how to move on in the industry, but also in the academia, what kind of options, what kind of projects that could be relevant for the industry, those kind of advices. So, I would strongly suggest, just reach out through LinkedIn. It's very easy to find alumni that way.
That's good advice. So from your perspective, well, first of all, you work in the meat industry, right? That's correct?
Right. So I am. I came with a kind of an agenda because I worked a lot in plant-based. So all my positions before were plant-based product development, and with the sustainability challenges, the meat industry is right now trying to shift into a more sustainable model. So I'm here at Dawn Farm Foods, traditionally a meat processing company. They're doing, what they can to move to a different kind of model. And one of their R&D pipeline, innovation pipeline, focuses heavily on plant-based meat analog development. So that's why that is one of my big goals while I'm at Dawn Farm Foods.
Okay, perfect. That kind of answers my question, but so does this shift to vegetarianism and veganism kind of offer new opportunities to people studying either in food science, bioresource engineering, or even environment, possibly?
Oh, yes. I see a whole range of opportunities for people from Mac. I can say that, a lot of the Mac campus alumni are very, traditionally focused on sustainability. We had the most, vegan focused barbecues in McGill in general. So I would say that, a lot of us coming out from Mac already has the mindset, the right kind of mindset to be, the leaders of this new world where, we're heavily focused on sustainability.
Great, thank you. And now our third speaker is Dr. Frida Beauregard. So could you also provide us with some background about your research and your current position?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So like Derek, I've been at Mac for a while. Previous to my PhD, I did my undergrad there as well as a master's degree. So I was also quite familiar with the campus before I started and went through some of the same moments during my PhD of like, wow, I'm still here. But unlike Derek, I'm still at Mac. So I still love it there. So my PhD research focused on native plants. So I was within the Department of Plant Science under the supervision of Sylvie Dubois. And I was doing a lot of modeling of where plants are. So I was trying to answer the question, why are plants located where they are located in the wild in Quebec? So why they stop occurring when you get to a certain point, and why are they more frequent in other areas? So it was really a lot of modeling and not a lot of field work, but I'm really passionate about plants and nature in general. So I was like, wow, I felt like I was really spending a lot of time with my computer during my degree. And I realized that in ecology, there's really a lot of the questions that are kind of needing to be answered are much more computational in nature than field-based in nature. And felt like a real disconnect in terms of my passions and what I was doing, even though I felt like the work I was doing to try to answer these really fundamental questions was very worthwhile and important. I knew it wasn't what I wanted to continue on in. There's also not exactly an industry focused around native plants. So I was like, okay, I don't know what I'm going to do next. So I had a lot of doubts about, where I was going in terms of my career when I was a student, I think. And so I started getting into teaching during my PhD, and I really liked that. So I had the opportunity to take on course lectureships within the department in plant ecology. And then I've continued to work in that going forward. So I'm still a course lecturer in plant science and in McGill School of the Environment. And I got the opportunity after I graduated. I was still working a little bit with my supervisor on some projects and still talking to people in the department. And I was looking for a job within the Mac community. I was hoping to do something that would be, still using some of my skills, but working more with people and hoping to do something with plants, because that's really where my passion is plants and people. That's kind of, I realized what I liked the most about my degree. So I was really happy to be able to get this position as the curator of the McGill University Herbarium, which is the collection of preserved plant specimens that we have. It's a little bit like a library of dried plants. So they're samples from all over the world that have been preserved, like through pressing and mounting on a piece of paper. Our collection is starting with a sampling that was done in Montreal about 200 years ago. So it's a really amazing collection to get to work with and to get to promote. And I'm really very happy being there, even if it's maybe not, as, I don't want to say well-paying a job, because it pays fine for what I need. But I think if I had tried to go into industry, like I could have maybe become a data scientist or something like that and worked in quite something very different from my degree, but it wasn't a direction I ever really wanted to go in. So I never tried to go further into becoming like, okay, I've basically studied statistics and computer, modeling. I could have gone that way, but I chose not to. So I'm happy to be still with plants and engaging with people through students and through things that I do with the herbarium.
Thanks a lot. So what are some pros and cons of working in the academic field?
Pros and cons. Well, I think the people that you work, I don't have a contrasting experience, but I think the people that I work with tend to be passionate about what they're doing. They tend to be, fun to talk to. I like working with undergraduate students because they're at a period in their lives when they're doing a lot of learning themselves. And I think it's a really special time to get to engage with somebody about what their passions are, talking to them about what their interests are, encouraging them, writing, even things like having students come back and ask for a reference letter a couple of years later to see where they are on their path. But those are the things I find personally very rewarding. I don't know the challenges. Maybe some things would happen faster in a private company. I don't know. Like there's been a move to have some things happen that I realize, it's going to be a lot longer because McGill's a large institution and there's a lot of other things happening. It's not like maybe in a smaller company it would be, somebody would make a decision, it would happen the next day. I don't know. But that's not really a huge criticism, I guess. I'm a very patient person, so it doesn't bother me.
If we were to take some of your classes, what do you teach?
What do you teach? I teach, about plants. So one of the classes I teach is flowering plant diversity, which is an introduction to how to identify plants, all the different kinds of habitats that plants grow in, and the basic features of those habitats. I've also taught a class through the McGill School of the Environment about the evolution of life on Earth, which is quite a fun class to teach. I was co-teaching that class with a geologist. So we cover from before the Earth existed to the present time, including human evolution and, first microorganisms. So it's quite a lot, but it's a really fun class also to teach. Yeah. But it really, I'm just as a course lecturer, it's whatever is available for me to teach, I apply to teach it each term. It's not like I'm a faculty lecturer where I have a really large number of courses that are assigned to me each term. It's a bit more at my discretion, but at the same time, there's a possibility that I wouldn't get to reteach a class because, there could be somebody assigned to teach that class other than me, who's a professor. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you very much. So the next series of questions will be any panelist can answer, so feel free to discuss amongst yourselves. So first of all, what skills have you learned while doing your PhD and how do they still apply to your career now?
I'll go. I would say one that always pops out to me is being able to kind of assimilate large data sets, and sometimes kind of, depending on what project you're kind of working on, sometimes contradictory information, and try to weigh those against themselves and try to take, kind of external reports, internal reports, and try to come up with something cohesive at the end. That's definitely a skill that I developed and learned during my PhD, and it's something that if it's not day to day, it's definitely week to week that it helps me continually, depending on the various projects that I'm working on.
I would say project management skills, and also trying to push things forward. I'm saying that in a kind of troubleshooting kind of sense, whichever is the roadblock in you getting your experiments done, then you have to fix it. And that, kind of mindset has been very helpful in my career.
So there's probably a difference between academia and industry. So how was that transition? Are there certain things that you wish you had learned or had more experience with to prepare you for the job that you have right now?
I can answer that question. I think just in terms of the type of interactions that you get, I think in the industry you do get a lot of cross-functional kind of roles where you need to collaborate with different kind of people with different kind of background. Whereas in PhD, you're really isolated in your bubble. Everyone's working towards similar things around your age, except for your supervisor, of course, but you don't get exposure to people with diverse backgrounds and age differences. So that is something I feel like, something that you can't learn from your PhD, that would be good to have, either through just, your personal network or other kind of, exposed part-time jobs or things like that. But that is something, a reality that I had to face when I started my industry career.
For sure, I would just add on that, yeah, there's just kind of various kind of almost soft skills like that, where in terms of having to onboard or influence or motivate people that you have in your organization or externally, depending on the project, that may not be their day to day. There could be far from being experts in it, and they could be not all that interested in what needs to be done. But it's definitely a skill to be able to express why it's important for the company, and what needs to be done, and how their contribution, even if they don't see it right away necessarily, how it's necessary and critical to move a project forward.
Great, thank you. Is there a big demand for PhD holders in the industry? Some say that hiring managers may consider PhDs as being overqualified. So is that a myth, or is that sometimes true?
I think that was certainly the case when I started looking for jobs in the industry, but I think the trend is changing. So PhD, I think right now is very much in demand, and people are looking for PhD qualifications because that just enables you to do so many more things, having that scientific background. So I think that was true, but not anymore.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think kind of the mentality is kind of changing too. I think that, maybe in the past, if you did a PhD, like, oh, you should just be in academia, and that's really the only path for you, and you're going to be, some hermit that you're weird to talk to when you get out into the real world, that kind of thing. But by and large, I think that a lot of companies, at least speaking from my experience, see value in that as well, because it's not necessarily, and as I said, now I kind of work in a domain that doesn't really isn't really directly applicable to what I'd studied, but the value is there in terms of all the other skills. It's you're able to handle kind of large scale projects, and they know that you won't waver in the face of what difficulties that come up and that kind of thing. So there's a lot of other aspects that come up versus or not just necessarily the technical expertise as well.
Okay, thank you. So many students sometimes feel like they don't fit in the grad school environment for reasons such as self-doubt or comparing yourself to others who have more publications or something like that. So that's imposter syndrome. Is that something that you might have experienced, and do you have some tricks on how to overcome imposter syndrome?
I think everybody sort of goes through that kind of stage, maybe for a shorter period of time and longer period of time. I would say I had a quite short period of time where I had going through that syndrome, but I just overcame it by saying that I am building an expertise in an area that hasn't been looked at before. So I'm the only one who can answer some of those questions in my field. So that's how I went around it. The number of publications, for sure, that's a metric for academia, but I would say in the industry, if you were to have, more than enough, it wouldn't really matter. It can't even fit in your CV anyways.
That's true. It's also kind of accepting the reality that, like anything else in life, there's kind of inherent differences to different kind of research areas and research groups, and what kind of things that people are looking at. And maybe some will generate lots of data that then afterwards, you can look at it 3 different ways and maybe get 3 different publications from it, from doing one set of experiments versus something else where it's all, everything has to be its own set of distinct work. So it's a lot more kind of hands-on versus, the reward, if you can put it that way, that you get at the end. So there's like Sue said, it's something that you kind of go through because you're always kind of trying to, especially when you're a student, you're trying to kind of benchmark yourself to others, and okay, am I doing well? Am I getting behind? Because it's hard. When you're taking courses, you pass a course, check on to the next thing. but you need to accept at a certain point that, and it takes some time, that it may be a different curve that you're going on with your particular study. But as long as you're moving forward, and you know, as long as your supervisor tends to agree, then you're probably in a good place.
All right, perfect. So I don't know if you had many extracurriculars while you were studying either your undergraduate or your PhDs, but do you think there's an importance for that and a demand when you get a job to be involved in your community or at university?
It's a good question. I have no idea what the answer is. For myself, I wasn't volunteering, but I think I couldn't have gotten along further if I hadn't started teaching. Like, it wasn't part of my degree what I was doing. It was paid employment though. And I think that experience, and before that, so many TA-ships, like I knew teaching was something I was interested in. I had to build that separately than my actual degree. But I don't know if I had done other volunteering, honestly, if it would have been important or not.
I guess I can add in that it's, at least from my experience, I don't think it's something that's played like a you know, a large role, I guess, either in myself getting hired or kind of being at times on the other side of the table over the last few years. And I'm not saying don't volunteer. That's not really the message. It always helps to, you know, you personally, your development and kind of becoming a more well-rounded person. I think there's definitely a benefit to that. But in terms of kind of looking at the list of achievements on a CV, whether it's a publication, whether it's volunteering, to Sue's point, at a certain point you can't fit everything there, you know, even if you wanted to. So maybe it's the case if you're going into something or you're looking to get into something afterwards that it's you know, super competitive, and you know there's going to be an aspect where they look at the volunteering hours that you put in, that kind of thing. But at least kind of going into a normal stream, I want to say, it hasn't really something that's come up for me.
Thank you. So obviously there's a pandemic going on. How has your respective industry adapted to this? And do you think these changes are positive and will remain once things settle down? Or do you think everything is going to mostly go back to the way it was before?
I could say there's a lot of masks and hand washing where there wasn't necessarily before in terms of the real, you know, physical differences. Beyond that, it's been just a lot of working from home as I am today. Now it's really changed to something that unless there's really something to do in a particular facility, if you don't have a real reason to be there, then you shouldn't be there. And that I think that will kind of go back once things kind of get back to normal, whatever that new normal will look like. But I do think to a certain extent there will be a lasting impact from that, because I think people by and large realize the positives that they get from working from home more often, traveling less. There's a lot more remote meetings too. Then I think that will stay, because I think that aspect at least has a cost savings for the company as well. So I think some things will stay the same, and some things will maybe go back a little bit.
Yeah, at McGill, there's a lot of, obviously, people working from home. Anybody that doesn't need to be at the campus is working remotely. And I think some of that will probably be kept. I mean, I think some people would enjoy, again, not commuting, the sustainability initiatives that are ongoing at the campus kind of tie in nicely with trying to get people to drive less. And I could see it, you know, maybe there will be in the future some more specific policies about staff working from home if they're able to do so. I wouldn't be surprised if it does change things going forward.
Right. I would also add that I used to travel a lot for different type of customer presentations, you know, and having customers visit our sites. All of those things are now happening virtually, and we do believe it will stay, you know, at least for the majority of the cases. Also, the food industry was hugely impacted, as you know, for COVID. The food service industry and how the demand has increased for the retailers. So that has implications for ingredient manufacturers like us, where the pace of the innovation was increased, and we need to produce innovative products at a much faster pace to keep up with the demand and also the needs. And also the focus on sustainability and healthy products coming out from this COVID is really pushing us to develop products that are going to make an impact.
Thank you. So I don't know how quickly you were able to get jobs coming out of university, but do you have some tips about what you definitely should include in your CV, or interview tips, or where to search for jobs, something like that?
From my aspect, I guess the general tip for the CVs is just don't try to include everything that you did as a student. Keep it kind of concise. Generally, companies will give a kind of a few minutes to look over something as part of their initial screening, that kind of thing, or the hiring manager, and not much more than that. In terms of where to look, I think I just found the posting for my job just through like a Google search or something. There wasn't any particular site that I used, if I remember correctly. But just try to, I guess, remain open. I happened to find something that was really applied to what I had studied, but it doesn't always happen that way. So just try to kind of remain open as to different ways that you can use your skills, even if it's outside of your project scope that you've been kind of immersed in for the last few years.
Mm-hmm. I attended a few workshops when I was at McGill in terms of working on my CV and updating LinkedIn profile. LinkedIn is very important. And make sure that you use all the right keywords in your title and also in the highlights section, so that people can find you and immediately associate your expertise to the type of job that the opportunity. In terms of getting interview tips, I think just showing what in a kind of context way, different give different examples how you overcame difficulties in terms of project managing and hurdles in your PhD work, is able to provide some examples of how you perform in that environment. So coming up with those examples is key, I would say, in an interview.
Amazing, thanks a lot. Frida, how did you apply to your herbarium curator job? Where did you find this job? Was it posted on McGill website, or?
Yeah, like all postings at McGill, it was posted through their postings, platform, and I had been told about it. Because I was still involved in the department, I knew that it was coming up as a posting. So yeah, I applied, obviously. Yeah, it's funny. I didn't do like the same kind of job search as you guys. I just I knew I wanted that job and I applied to it and I got it. So I've never gone through that whole what I think must be an incredibly stressful process of going out and looking for a job from people that I've never met before. So I don't have a lot to add. I think just like being at McGill, I've always tried to be, my best, and I always tried to do everything as well as I could and engage with people in a way that was incredibly, respectful and considerate. And I felt like every time I interacted with somebody was important for my future, and I think it paid off. I don't want to say it paid off, but like, that's who I am. That's the way I would behave anyway. But I think it helped in getting that job in the department that I was already sort of, you know, working in as a course lecturer. Yeah, so yeah, not a big long story in that application. And then I applied once, and then the position changed. I had to reapply for my own job and go through a second interview process against external candidates, which was an experience, but it was, you know, it was fine. Like I had already worked in that position for a year, so I was quite able to answer all the questions that came up, even though the position had changed a little bit and they had to repost it. So anyway, yeah, it was through the internal postings. There are other job boards that I'd looked at, just I'd never applied to other jobs, because, you know, like there's so many different kinds of jobs out there. A lot of the ones that were more in my field are not, you know, necessarily going to be even in Montreal. There's like, you know, different research centers. A lot of the jobs in plant ecology are government focused. There's not that many of them that come up that are really research positions. So I wasn't really interested in moving to like Sault Ste. Marie or Fredericton, or, you know, like all the many places that these kinds of jobs might come up, or internationally, you know. So I never seriously embarked on another search for a job.
Thank you so much. I think that's all the time we have for my questions. So now we're gonna leave it up to the public. So John, if you found any questions in the chat that you would like to ask. Okay, there are no questions in the chat yet. So when people were registering, they had the chance to submit their own questions. So I'm going to go through a few of these in the meantime. So how did you decide if doing a PhD would be beneficial for you? So why would someone choose to do a PhD and not just a master's, for example?
For me, it was largely personal curiosity. I saw a PhD as a way to continue learning about something I wanted to continue learning about. And I mean, I was interested obviously in getting the credentials as well, but it was not really career driven as a decision.
I would say that I thought similarly at the time too. Definitely interested in getting the credential, and definitely was just kind of, you know, I'd kind of known the type of project that Dr. Ramaswamy was working on. I was kind of interested in that aspect anyways. And it was more about kind of trying to see what was out there. I first started doing a master's, and then in the first year did the, I can't remember what it's called, not the shortcut, but there's a word for that anyway, switched over to PhD. What is it, sorry?
Fast track.
Fast track, thank you. Yes, better than shortcut. It's not really a shortcut, it just, you know, you're there longer actually. But anyways, and just it was out of personal interest and just kind of drive at that point that I wanted to see it through to its finish. It's kind of funny when you look back and you ask the question that way, you know, how do you determine that it was going to be beneficial? And like, really, to a certain extent, you don't, you know, you're kind of taking a risk, you're investing your time, your money to a certain extent. And, you know, you're kind of trying to push yourself to learn something and specialize in something in the hopes that it will be useful to you in the future. And I'm sure that, you know, there's probably some cases where it hasn't been useful to people. But I think by and large, whether or not, as I said kind of before, whether or not you stay in the same kind of domain, I think that gives you a lot of tools outside of that will be applicable no matter what you end up doing after.
Thank you. We did have a question in the chat that popped up. So did you struggle with balance and taking care of your mental health during your PhD? And let's add, how did you overcome that, if that was possible?
I didn't particularly struggle with that aspect. I was really busy during my PhD, and I really treated it like a day job, if you know what I mean. Like, I started in the morning and I ended in the evening, and that was it. I didn't work on the weekend. I didn't work in the evening. And I think if you added up my hours spent per week, it probably would have added up to honestly like, less than 30 hours a week spent at the computer. I had 2 kids during my PhD. I was, caring for young kids and doing my work. I couldn't keep working in the evening. I couldn't keep working on the weekend. I just was like, day's done, I'm done. And I think that really was a helpful way to approach my balance. Making friends, doing things during the day at lunchtime, taking an actual break at lunchtime, all those things really helped and still help.
I would say that I was kept sane by my lab mates. I wouldn't have made it through without them. It's just like sharing, difficulties and then try to troubleshoot things together and, talking about frustrations, things not moving so well, or interactions with your supervisor, having somebody to kind of understand and then, give their feedback on it has been very good for my mental health during my PhD.
Thank you. So someone asked, what's a starting salary for a PhD in Quebec? What sector is looking for PhDs the most? Is it industry or academia or government, non-government organizations? You don't have to say your own salary, but if you have kind of a range, something to expect.
Honestly, I think it's probably hard to say because I think it's really dependent on what industry you go into. I mean, because there's one thing to say that you have a given degree, and whether it's a PhD or any other degree, somebody who comes out and goes to work for, the Google of this world is going to go and get to play the ping pong table and get paid huge money, and versus somebody who's working at a mom and pop kind of industry, it's won't be necessarily the same money or kind of conditions. So at least in terms of money, I think it's difficult to say.
And then the follow-up question was if what sectors are looking for PhD jobs the most, if you kind of have an idea, so like government, industry, academia, non-government organizations, like nonprofit organizations. It's okay if you don't know.
I can only speak from an industry point of view, and I can say there's quite a lot of opportunities in the food industry. For sure, it depends on what you're looking for, but definitely, because food science encompasses so many different areas. So for Derek, it was engineering, and then there's a whole aspect around safety, quality, regulatory, and the actual food product development as well. So and they're looking for expertise in all those domains.
Okay, thank you very much. This is actually a question that was submitted before. So what are your opinions on the large changes happening in the food industry now, in particular within the introduction of AI, so artificial intelligence, and cellular agriculture?
That's a heck of a question.
Well, cellular agriculture and AI are very different things, but they can be used together. I can tell you that AI and machine learning are used, are being introduced to the manufacturing setting, in the industry 4.0 aspect, and food manufacturing will probably be adopted in the near future. I know our company is heavily pushing forward in implementing different kind of technologies around that area. In terms of cellular agriculture, that's a very big topic in the meat, alternate protein, alternate meat kind of discussions. For sure, I think it's going to be difficult for the established company to jump into that area right away. But I think what they're doing is that they're looking at startups and how they can optimize the process and then kind of leverage that technology later on.
Thank you. Someone also asked, this is more specific for Frida, since you're the only one in the more academic field. So would working as a research assistant and teaching assistant help get jobs in academia? Is it necessary to have a TA-ship every semester to build a good CV?
I think it really depends on whether you're interested in like a research position or a teaching position. So yes, for teaching, obviously you need to do as much teaching as you can. Better than a TA-ship would be to have, maybe had a TA-ship where you're responsible for giving the labs, or you can have some element of what you're doing be in the form of course creation, where you're, making up components of the course. I think, just grading papers as a TA-ship doesn't really add much to a teaching CV. But as far as research, obviously, a lot of research intensive universities will look more heavily at your publication record when they're thinking about how competitive you're going to be as a professor to acquire grants and things like that. It really relates much more to your publication record. So I think, yes, whatever research you're doing, whether it's directly with your supervisor as a graduate student or in a lab as an undergraduate student, you need to start building up those research skills. And if you want to get into academia as like a professor or another research focused position, there's some positions out there that are non-teaching entirely, like at some research institutes, you might be, just associated with the university, but just really only occasionally being like a co-supervisor of a graduate student at another university or something. So definitely it is the publications that you're going to produce that will be judged most, I think, for those kinds of academic positions. Obviously getting a PhD, but then also, what was the topic you studied? Does it match the kind of position you're hoping to get? And what publications did you come up with are all important choices. So yeah, maybe, like taking a research assistant's position could help build a skill that could be important as well. So like maybe if it's a skill that you feel like you're missing, that could be a reason to do a research assistantship. Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Someone asked, have you ever considered doing an alternative career entirely different from your PhD project and background? Maybe a friend or a lab mate chose a completely different path. So do you know how that might go?
My life is full of pipe dreams of things that I would like to do. And because I was really convinced I didn't want to stay in the kind of research direction that I was just describing of like publications, get a lot of research done, like I felt that wasn't me. I like the last couple of years of my degree, I was just like, I got to do something else. So I definitely thought of a lot of different things. And I actually started a small farming business where I live, which was fun. And I could have seen expanding it, but it was a terrible fit with having children and other, like just the schedule of the rest of my life did not fit with trying to have that business be my main source of income. And so after about a year and a half or so, I was like, okay, forget it. This is not going to be something I can expand on. And started looking for other positions. I'd still been working part-time at McGill. So yeah, that's where I was at the end of my PhD. I was outside, getting my hands dirty, literally. And having a lot of fun, but I'm still having a lot of fun. It's all right.
Very interesting. So I have a question. Is publishing papers purely is only done in the academic field, or do you know people who publish papers while having a government or an industry job?
Definitely.
Yeah, I was just going to say yes.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, me too. Definitely governmental. There's a fair amount of publishing, and also industrial is always a fine line because you're typically trying to keep whatever research you're doing kind of hidden, secret, not hidden, but secret, at least the finer details of it. But depending on the projects, yeah, I mean, it's we participated in some that have gone on to be published in the end, and it just kind of there's a certain editing process that goes into it to make sure that not too much is out there, but it can be done from both sides, I would say.
Definitely, it's a huge part in the industry for reputation building, but around IP building. So a lot of patent publication activity in the industry.
Good point.
Thank you. All right. Sorry, just gonna pick another question since we're out of questions from the audience. So when would be the best time for current PhD students to look for jobs? Is it December before your graduation in June? Is it like years ahead, or is it I need a job now, I'm going to look for jobs now?
I would say that, the sooner you could start looking, the better. I mean, like anything else, I mean, if you can plan it out and you can see that, or find a company that is willing to hire you, in the following 2-3 months or whatever, whenever you're done your defense, or in some cases, I know there's other students that have even started before the defense because you're not really, working 100% on your project anymore. But to a certain extent, I think that you can't start looking too early, because usually if a job is posted, it's because they want to fill the posting fairly quickly. So it's kind of hard to say, and it really depends on the position. And I do think it's also beneficial, at least it was for me, to take a couple months after the defense to kind of, I don't know, relax a little bit. But then obviously, it depends on how quickly you need to get a job and move on, or get income, that kind of thing. But that's something that could be beneficial to kind of pad into your schedule as well, I think.
Thank you. Do you have any tips for productivity and organization? So obviously that's important both in your career and during your PhD. So do you have any apps that you would recommend, or productivity like procedures? I know about the Pomodoro method. Is that something you used, or something else?
I didn't use any fancy anything. I tried to keep a calendar, make sure that I was on track for everything and not forgetting stuff. But when I was working, That was my main thing. And I would just do mental check-ins, like, is this progressing the work that I wanted to progress, or is this something else that I'm reading just because I'm curious, or because, I would try to put a focus on what I was doing more than using a specific tool. I just try to focus.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'll just add, when I was studying, I didn't really use anything, but I guess as part of my professional career, I've kind of learned that it is handy to use tools. I don't use any specific methods, but I'm a quite forgetful person, so I've learned over the years that I need to write something down if it's going to get done. So it's just about use the Google Suite kind of thing. So just by using Google Tasks and assigning realistic dates, and keeping to that. And over the years, I've become a huge fan of Gantt charts, and just in terms of project management, and again, setting realistic timelines and keeping other people responsible to that as well, when other people have tasks to achieve and that kind of thing. So, but there's no specific method outside of that I use.
All right, perfect. I believe Chantal has a question.
I have a question sent to me from somebody. So I think this is a good question for Sue and for Derek, because you both have experience in industry. And we heard a bit from Derek, so I'll ask Sue. The question is, how long did you wait before getting hired in industry? Or maybe how long did it take you to get to your current position or to your first position?
So when I started my first position, I was still doing a postdoc. So I started after my PhD postdoc project. That was about a year contract. And I was lucky. Sorry. So while I was finishing that postdoc, that opportunity happened. So I was recruited for that position. So I know I was very lucky that I didn't have many gaps, but and to be at my position. So I graduated in 2014. I did about a year of postdoc, and then, so it took me about 5 years. So I hope that answers the questions.
Yeah, that's great. Derek, I think for you, it was a pretty short window between PhD and postdoc. Do you want to talk maybe about the break that you took between your PhD and your job now?
Yep, sure. I defended my thesis in February. It was middle of February, 2015. And then it was kind of the summer. It was, I think, in July when I finally decided that it was time to start looking for a job. So there was a few months there where, yeah, I mean, I had really kind of pushed myself to finish as the last, I don't know, 6-8 months, even last year or so, to kind of bring the project to an end and move on to the next phase kind of thing. So yeah, it took a few months just to kind of decompress and from then, yeah, it was in the summer and happened across this job, which was kind of a perfect. It was like the description was almost like written for me. It was kind of, I don't know how that happened still, but anyways, that's you have to take it when you can. So yeah, and then I started, I think it was in September. So it ended up being about 6-7 months that I ended up having in the end. But it was definitely something that I enjoyed it, and I traveled a bit. I didn't really do anything that special, but it was just kind of, it was kind of a transitional step from studying all the time, including nights and weekends, and just kind of having a lot of free time and figuring out what I want to do as a next step.
Thank you so much. We barely have any time left, so I'm just going to ask a concluding question. So now that you're in the position that you are in right now, what do you see yourself doing for the future in the next years?
Well, I just started getting more involved with different groups at McGill. There's like I mentioned earlier, the sustainability projects working groups, and there's a whole bunch of different projects that I'm sort of happy to start getting involved in, towards like greening the campus, incorporating more native plants in the gardens that we have at Mac. It's a pet project that I would love to, take to fruition in a few years' time.
For myself, at least for the next few years, I'm kind of loving where I'm at right now and getting to do more and more, I guess, interesting stuff. And a part of that is kind of getting away from what I studied when I was really kind of still fixed on the dehydration process and stuff at the beginning. And I would say that that's kind of a comment as well, when you're looking to if you're going kind of into the industry and finding that job you're looking for, is to try to find, at least it's hard to know when you're not in the organization, but once you get in, what kind of the mobility is within that organization and opportunities for growth that there is, because I know that I mean, from personal experience, that can contribute a lot to, there's salary and all this kind of stuff, and but your day-to-day, your coworkers, and where you can go within the company has a massive impact on your overall happiness too at work. So that's important things to consider as you move forward.
Yes, I'm hoping to continue growing as a food scientist within the industry setting, and really working at the interface of bringing science to consumers and educating them.
Thank you so much. So I believe we're out of time. I want to thank all three of you for joining us and giving us a lot of insight on your jobs and your pathway to your current career. I'd like to also thank Dong Yun, who is here with us, for conducting the interviews that kind of inspired the questions for today. And also Chantal and Paul for being in charge of the TRaCE project and making this happen. And Of course, thanks everyone for joining. It was really nice to see this be a successful event.
Yes, thank you so much, Carolyn, and huge thanks to our panelists. So you can see that Paul and I have gotten used to our reaction buttons. If we could all take a minute and show our appreciation for our panelists who volunteered to come talk to us this afternoon, that would be wonderful. We are so appreciative of your time and your expertise, and so happy to be with you here today. And Paul, would you like to add any closing words as we end our session today?
Like I said before, we're building a mentoring community, and that's one of the things we were doing right now over the past hour. I can't tell you how extraordinarily good and valuable the work that you just have done has been. The kind of ability that you out there, the three discussants, have to bring to people who are in program now is really invaluable. I know this from personal experience, because when someone comes to me who's doing a PhD and says, what is there outside the academy? I go, I don't know. I know nothing about it. So let me put you in touch with people who do know. Thank you so much for the work that you are doing. It was grand. It was really great. We're going to keep on doing it.
Yes, so we have events with every faculty planned for the coming year. So if you'd like to catch up with people working in all kinds of different sectors, from government to NGO to academia, feel free to follow us on our newsletter and follow us on our website, which is tracemcgill.com, which I will put into the chat. And we hope to see you again soon. So huge thanks again to the MCGSS, and huge thanks to our panelists, and have a great night.